Welcome to Inside the Mexican Culture.
Hello, what is up, guys? Welcome back to my podcast, where today I'll be doing things a little bit differently, as I'll be joined by my father, Abel, and we are going to be having a conversation about his life growing up as a Mexican American and talking about things like his traditions, his background, his school life, and just how it all shaped him to be the person he is today. Let's begin with your life growing up in Matamoros. How do you describe it? What were some of the things you like to do?
I think it was very different. You know, when I think back on it, I have these pictures growing up, and they're all in these sepia tones, and so it's all in that kind of faded look. And so I remember it in those tones. It was kind of, it was hot. It was very hot in Matamoros. I remember growing up in my house and not having central AC. It was fans, having the windows open, and always kind of just being outside. I remember that, growing up, I was always spending a lot of time outside, going with my dad to different places. My dad was a dentist, and so he spent a lot of time being very proper and going to doing a lot of the things that were kind of like he was always trying to take us to places that were kind of like cultural there in Matamoros. I remember one of the first things one of my earliest memories is going to La Plaza right there downtown in Matamoros and seeing how they were taking the Mexican flag, how they were setting it up and taking it out to put it up in the morning. And I remember my dad was very you have to stand a certain way, you put your arm on your chest, this is what it means, and this is it's being proud of the flag and being respectful. I think that was one of my very earliest memories. And so for me, growing up in Matamoros was a lot about Mexico and being proud of Mexico. That was one of the big things with my dad, being proud.
Growing up as a very proud Mexican, do you feel like there were any other traditions you might have celebrated?
I think definitely for us, some of the other traditions, circulated around the holidays. So, Christmas and New Year's, it's celebrated very different in Mexico. We grew up seeing a lot of those, a lot of what the celebrations were in the United States off of TV. So we spent a lot of time kind of seeing how the United States or Americans were really celebrating Christmas, and it was very different for us in Mexico. So instead of having turkey, it'd always be like, for Christmas, we wouldn't have turkey. We'd have like tamales, or we'd have like a ham or something like that. And then for New Year's, it wasn't the same. In Mexico, we celebrate New Year's with some apple cider, champagne, something like that, and then we would have the 12 grapes. That was something that my dad was very into, making sure that we did the 12 grapes. My mom and my dad, that we celebrated the New Year's and ringing in the New Year's by eating those 12 grapes, going outside, and back then there was no fireworks. It was other types of fireworks that were being shot up in the air. But after New Year's, we would have the Rosca de Reyes. We would have so we would have the Rosca de Reyes, and we would also have the three wise men bring us gifts. And so that is definitely something that we don't celebrate over here in the United States, where the three wise men would bring us extra gifts after Christmas. And that was always really nice. My grandma was a big one to celebrate that, and she would always make sure that we had extra gifts. And just some of the other celebrations, El Día del Niño, making sure that we go out and celebrate during Independence Day in Mexico. My dad telling us a story about how Mexico won its independence, telling us about all that kind of stuff. My dad was really big into the culture and telling us the history of Mexico, making sure that we knew a little bit.
From what you described, you sound very proud of your Mexican roots and cultures, celebrating so many, traditions that I didn't really celebrate with you. And do you always feel like you were so connected? Because especially since me and my sister don't grow up celebrating that, do you feel like you might have grown away, detached from your Mexican?
Absolutely. I think for me, one of the biggest things that that lost me some of what that Mexican culture really is coming to school. Yes, I was born here in the United States, and my parents, they wanted me to have an American education, and so they put me or they enrolled me in a private school here in Brownsville. And the private school that they enrolled me in is the name is First Baptist School. So it's a very white school. All the teachers, the principals, everybody was American, white, and one of the first things that we started seeing, and it's also a Baptist school, and as a Catholic, you know, it's a different religion, and so my parents, they wanted to make sure I had a good education, but they enrolled me in this school. One of the first things that they started to do was talk to us all in English, making sure that they were sharing their American culture with me. One of the very first things that I remember starting kindergarten there was Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is American Thanksgiving is something that was predominantly celebrated in Brownsville. In Mexico, that was not. I remember telling your grandma, hey, are we going to celebrate Thanksgiving? I'd like a turkey, because we were seeing that at school. And your grandma was not happy. She was like, that is an American celebration. We don't celebrate American Thanksgiving here. We celebrate other things in November. And so it was a little bit different. And so I do remember going and, coming in that same time I was telling her, are we going to celebrate Thanksgiving? I was like, hey, we have to dress up for school. We have I'm a first grader. I'm like, we need to dress up for school. There's what do you mean you need to dress up? Oh, well, either I'm a pilgrim or I'm an Indian. And you want to guess what I was?
An Indian?
I was an Indian, man. Absolutely. Who were the pilgrims at my school? The little white kids. And so always that's where I started to really lose some of my culture and adopt more the American culture. There were still things that I liked and that I did with my dad, but I started to adopt more the American culture and lose some of my Mexican culture.
And did you ever feel like they were kind of forcing it on you, or was it more passive?
I think looking back on it now, I can see that they were pushing it. It may, as a kid, I felt maybe it was a little bit more passive, or it was cooler to be more, to have the American culture and be wanting to be more white. I think that was one of the big things. And back, this is the 1980s when I'm going to school, and so there was a lot of silent, I don't want to say racism, but there was a lot of silent racism to the way that we were at school. I remember one time, going home and taking a gallon of milk and just drinking straight from the gallon of milk, just drinking milk, a lot of milk. And your Aunt Diana, she came and she was like, what are you doing? And I was like, well, I need to be whiter. And the way I thought I was going to be whiter was by drinking white milk. No more chocolate. I didn't want to put any chocolate in my milk. But again, a lot of that was, you need to be like the people that I was seeing, my teachers, the other students in my class. Yes, there were other Mexicans in my class, but we were strongly encouraged to be and adopt more of the American culture. So Thanksgiving, Halloween, that was something that was really big in Brownsville. That was not something big in Matamoros. That was not something we ever dressed up in Matamoros for Halloween. We did not celebrate Halloween like that in Matamoros.
It sounds very different to the type of schools I went to. Like, though I am mostly on the American side of things, growing up, I never really saw any pressures on Mexicans to be more American. But if there is one thing I do remember, is that in Idea Riverview, my elementary, this one kid that I later grew up to be good friends with, he had transferred in 3rd grade, and since he was very Mexican, he only spoke Spanish, right? And just I just always remember the teachers giving him such a hard time because of that fact. Like, you couldn't speak Spanish at all, or else they gave you 50 lines to write about how you're only gonna speak English. But he didn't know English, so just every day it'd always be just the teachers yelling at him, and he'd always be crying, and I always felt bad for him. But struggles like that, like, it's not very common to see today, but back then.
Well, and I think a lot of the things that that you may have, that I remember seeing from you at Idea Riverview is how the teachers tried to bring in and make more of the Mexican culture celebrations at your school, like Cinco de Mayo, like Independence Day, or like Charro Days. Those were not things that we, or at my school, that we were allowed to celebrate. It was American holidays, focus on American culture, and also the religious side of it. But I think at your school, I do remember seeing you have more of those types of events where it gave you an opportunity to celebrate your Mexican culture. For me, I didn't really have that.
And on that note, do you ever feel like you ever saw any challenges the Mexican people faced back then? Because in my class, I got to learn about some of the issues that many Mexicans faced with, being forced to go work in the, United States, and families being separated because of that, and, obviously racism, and, job opportunities, the wages, many things like that. And I was just wondering, did you ever see that in your times?
Yeah, absolutely. I saw challenges on both sides of the border. On the Mexican side, definitely seeing how I myself didn't have that many friends in Matamoros because I was primarily going to school here in the United States. And as I began to adopt more the American culture, some of the friends that I did have in Matamoros, or even like some of my cousins in Matamoros, it was very difficult to maintain that connection and to not really have that, be able to make that connection, because I started to lose a lot of the Spanish that I had. I couldn't like joke around in Spanish. Yeah, I could speak Spanish, but I didn't know how to joke around. I lost some of that, ability to talk to some of my cousins, and so not having the same ability to communicate was a very specific challenge. The other thing that I would see kind of around me by going and helping my grandma at her mercado was seeing how Mexicans were being taken advantage of. I think as Mexicans, we always want people to embrace our culture. So we're, and even as a kid, I would always see, people from universities and colleges, students would come down for spring break, and they would come and they would buy sombreros and sarapes. I don't remember my grandma ever, being like, oh, they're stealing our culture or anything like that. It was always like, no, we're sharing our culture. Let them buy, let them spend their money over here. We're happy that they're here. Always wanting to protect the students, even though those same spring breakers may have been laughing at us, making fun of us for the way we were living or maybe the way we were looking. It was always with respect, and that's one of the big things with Mexican culture. It's it's this respect aspect, and wanting to persevere and to just keep moving forward and make a good situation out of a bad one. I think that's one of the things that we can see all Mexicans try. Even the Mexicans that do try to come over to the United States, legally, illegally, they're hard workers. It doesn't really matter. They're there to work and make things better for themselves and their family.
And honestly, after hearing everything you just said, I definitely feel like I've been taking the Mexican culture for granted. Like whenever it came time to celebrate some of the festivals like Cinco de Mayo and the child days, like I never really appreciated celebrating them. Like I always just, you would invite me to go, but sometimes I would just like make an excuse to not go. And after, hearing about these struggles that, in class that the Mexicans face, and some of the things you talked about growing up very proud of your Mexican culture, I definitely feel a lot more inspired to at least appreciate my culture more and actually understand it rather than just, like half-heartedly celebrating it, and so from this point forward, I definitely do want to appreciate my Mexican culture more, and for that, I thank you. And
Absolutely. No, and I think one of the big things that, that I know we've tried to do in the past, like as a family, like I still remember a couple of years ago we went on a cruise ship to Mexico, and we got a chance to go visit a pyramid, and it's not a pyramid, right? It's a temple. That's the thing. Like you always hear it's a Mexican pyramid, and getting to see the temple and really hear about it and what it was for, and seeing it in person, I think that was one of the things that for me reconnected me with some of that the culture of what Mexico is, and wanting to learn a little bit more. And so I'm hoping that some of that rubs off on you, and I'm hoping that some of that inspires you to learn a little bit more. And I'm glad to see that, and I appreciate you taking the time today to ask me some questions and about my background and what my life was growing up, what my life was like growing up as a Mexican American here on the border.
Definitely. And again, thank you for joining me. I feel like this is a good place to wrap up, and that I could just hope that we can keep having more conversations like this in the future, and that that not only I learn something, and hopefully you learn something, but also our viewers may have learned something, about the Mexican American life, and that, to at least take away a lesson from this. And so, thank you.
Thanks.
And shout out to Pure Atmosphere Music on youtube.com for the music. Thank you.